Don't scream. Ain't no one up here. You are not leaving this place! Let me go! I hate it here! We won't stay!
We found smoke coming from this barn. Where are the girls, Widow?
I told you, I haven't seen them.
Her hand closed over the girl's mouth before either of them made a sound. The girl bit down by reflex and tasted skin and dust. The widow did not pull away. She pressed harder, steady, eyes locked on the second face buried in straw. That one was smaller. That one was shaking so hard the hay whispered. The older one did not move at all. She stared back, hollow-eyed, already braced for whatever came next. Don't scream. The words came out flat. Not kind. Not cruel. Just true. We didn't steal nothing. I know. Please. The widow eased her palm back slow, one finger at a time. No scream followed. Only breath, sharp and wet. She crouched lower, blocking the ladder with her body. She smelled blood under sweat. Cold fear. Long hunger. She scanned them fast. Bare ankles. Split knuckles. Shoes tied with wire. Runaways did not look like this. Thieves did not shake like this. You hurt? She asked. The older girl answered. She fell. Where? Fence. The younger nodded too quick. Her lip trembled. The widow reached for the wrist she could not stop watching. A badge hung there on twine. Bent. Burned black at the edges. Old metal, once proud. The older girl jerked back. Don't. The widow stopped. Where'd you get it? It's ours. Was. Silence spread. The barn creaked. Somewhere below, a boot scuffed dirt. The older girl swallowed. It was our daddy's. Footsteps sounded outside. One set. Heavy. A man's voice carried through the boards, easy, searching. Calling names like he expected answers. The younger girl gasped. The older went still as stone. The widow felt the sound crawl up her spine. She pictured hands grabbing hair, wrists twisted, doors slammed. She had seen it before. Different faces. Same ending. Same silence after. Girls. The widow did not think. She moved. She slid down the ladder rung by rung, slow enough to keep the wood quiet. Her boots hit the barn floor. She turned as the man stepped into view. Morning, he said. Morning. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. His eyes lifted, just a flick, toward the loft. The widow stayed still. Anyone else here? He asked. Ain't no one up here. You sure? I hear myself. He smiled like a habit. You see smoke last night. Neighbors burn trash. 2 girls from over east. Sisters. She shook her head once. No. They don't usually run far. She met his eyes. They usually get dragged back. Something tightened. Then he laughed. Tell me if you hear anything. I hear plenty. He left. His boots faded. The barn breathed again. The widow waited. Counted. When the sound was gone, she climbed. The loft waited, quiet and watching. The girls had not moved. Dust hung thick, slow, like the air itself was listening. He gone, the younger whispered. For now. The older studied her. You lie for us? I lie for myself. Ruth blinked. Mercy did not. They'll come back, Mercy said. They always do. The widow reached into her pocket and broke bread. Ruth took it like it might disappear. Thank you, she said after Mercy nudged her. Crumbs fell into the hay. The widow watched their hands, how careful they were, how used to loss. What's your names? The widow asked. Mercy. This is Ruth. The widow closed her eyes a beat. Opened them. You stay quiet. You don't move unless I say. Mercy lifted her chin. You gonna turn us in? No. You swear? I don't swear. Ruth whispered, Why help us? The widow stood and took the ladder in her hands. Because I know that look. What look? The one where nobody comes. She lowered the ladder rung by rung until it rested silent. Above her, two faces watched, caught between fear and trust. Her boots touched dirt as the voice outside drifted back again, closer this time. The barn held its breath. The barn door creaked open again like it had a memory. The widow felt it before she heard it. Wait. Authority. The sound of a man who did not ask permission. She stayed where she was, hands folded, eyes forward. The loft above her breathed. Hay shifted. She did not look up. Morning, miss. Morning. You look tired. I am. He stepped closer. Leather groaned. Spurs spoke for him. He smelled of smoke and coffee and something sour underneath. He looked around slow, like the place belonged to him already. His eyes climbed the ladder. She did not follow them. You see anything strange last night? He asked. Depends what you call strange. Smoke. Plenty of that lately. Fire don't just start. Neither do rumors. He smiled without warmth. Your husband used to say things like that. Her jaw set. My husband's dead. Still hear him though, don't you? She said nothing. He leaned on a post. 2 girls missing. I heard. Sisters. I heard. From that old place by the creek. She stayed quiet. House burned last night. So you said. Accident. The word sat there, soft and rotten. Funny thing, he went on. People keep seeing fires when land changes hands. She looked at him then. Just once. People see what you tell them to. He laughed. Girls don't usually run far. She said it before she meant to. They usually get dragged back. His smile thinned. You talking from experience. I'm talking from memory. He stepped closer. You ain't had children. Hard to know what girls need. The words landed sharp. She felt them find every hollow place. I know what they don't need. And what's that? Hands that hurt. Silence stretched. Above them, the loft creaked. She felt Ruth freeze. Felt Mercy listening hard. He straightened. If you see them. I won't. You sure? I already answered. He nodded slow. Land gets lonely out here. So do graves. His eyes flicked. Careful. With what? With how much you remember. He turned and walked away. The sound of law followed him out. Metal on wood. Power leaving without apology. When it was gone, the barn felt smaller. Emptier. She waited. Counted heartbeats. Then she looked up. Nothing answered. She took the ladder again. Each rung felt louder now. Her hands shook. At the top, the loft opened back into breath and eyes. "He come back," Ruth whispered. "Yes." "What he want?" "Everything." Mercy watched her. "He know." "He suspects." "That's worse." The widow nodded. "It is." She sat with them, back to the wall. "Listen to me. If he comes again, you don't move. You don't cry. You don't speak." Ruth nodded hard. Mercy asked, "You scared?" "Yes." "Good," Mercy said. "So are we." The widow looked at them, really looked. Not thieves. Not ghosts. Girls with fire still inside. She stood. "I'm going to get you food," she said. "Then we wait." "For what?" Ruth asked. "For the sound of law to forget us." Below them, the barn settled. Outside, boots moved farther away. The widow climbed down slower this time, knowing power always circled back. She paused at the bottom, hand on the ladder, listening to the barn like it might speak. It never did. It only held. She knew that sound. Houses did it too. When they remembered. When they waited. Her own house was like that. Full of rooms that listened and never answered back. She thought of the bed that stayed cold. The table set for one. The name she never said out loud anymore. Above her, the girls shifted once, then stilled. She felt the weight of them settle into the beams. Not a burden. A choice. Outside, the land stayed quiet, pretending nothing had changed. But something had. Law had entered and left. It always did. And every time it left, it took something small and living with it, unless someone said no. She said it now, without words, standing alone in the barn. She breathed once and did not turn back again. The ladder creaked when she climbed it again, slower this time, like she was asking permission from the wood. The loft smelled warmer now. Bread. Sweat. Fear settling into something else. The girls were sitting closer together. Ruth's knees pulled tight to her chest. Mercy upright, eyes fixed, watching the widow like a line drawn in dirt. "You got a name?" Mercy asked. The widow paused with one foot still on the rung. She stayed there longer than she meant to. Names carried weight. Names stayed when people didn't. She stepped fully into the loft before answering. "Yes." Ruth waited. "What is it?" The widow looked at the hay, at the beam with a crack shaped like a forked road. "Not yet." Mercy nodded once. She did not push. "I'm Mercy." "I'm Ruth," the younger said quick, like she was afraid the chance would pass. The widow let the names sit. She tested them in her head. They fit the girls the way scars fit skin. "You sisters," she said. Mercy answered. "Same blood." "Same fire," Ruth added, then covered her mouth like she'd said too much. The widow watched Mercy's face change. Just a flicker. Then gone. "Your parents," the widow said. Not a question. Mercy spoke flat. "Daddy's dead." Ruth shook her head. "They said he fell." Mercy turned on her. "He didn't fall." The widow leaned back against the beam. The wood was rough. It bit through her dress. "Where was your mother?" Ruth's voice dropped. "Gone." "Gone where?" "Just gone." Mercy stared at the floor. She stopped talking first. Then she stopped staying. Silence stretched. Outside, something banged metal on metal. The barn shifted but held. "The fire," the widow said. Mercy's hand closed around the badge on her wrist. "It wasn't an accident." "That's what they said," Ruth whispered. That's what they always say, the widow replied. Mercy lifted the badge, let it swing. They took it when he died. Gave it back after the fire. She swallowed. Like a joke. The widow felt a pressure behind her eyes. She blinked it down. She had heard that kind of joke before. Power liked to laugh last. Your daddy a lawman? She asked. He was, Mercy said. Until he wasn't. Ruth looked up. He kept papers. Mama said never touch them. She hesitated. They burned too. Not all, Mercy said. Some were gone before. The widow breathed out slow. She felt something shift inside her chest, something old stirring. My husband, she said, then stopped. The word hung. She finished anyway. He used to keep things too. Things he never showed me. Mercy looked at her. Where is he? Ground took him. Ruth frowned. Fire? No. Silence does the same, Mercy said. The widow nodded. That was true. Silence buried just as deep. She reached into her basket and pulled out more bread, a strip of dried meat. Ruth's eyes went wide. For us? For now. Mercy studied her. What do you want? The widow didn't answer right away. She tore the bread. Handed it over. I want you to eat. Ruth took it. Chewed fast. Mercy ate slower. Watching. Always watching. You hiding us, Mercy said. Yes. You scared, Ruth said. Yes. Mercy's mouth tightened. Then why? The widow finally said her name. It came out quiet. Because I buried a child I never got to know. And a man who stopped speaking before he died. And because men like him, she meant the sheriff, though she did not say it, count on women being empty. Ruth swallowed. You empty. No, the widow said. I'm full of things that don't sleep. Footsteps sounded again. More than one this time. Voices overlapping. A laugh. Higher. Younger. A deputy. Ruth froze. Mercy grabbed her hand. They're back. The widow stood. Listen to me, she said. You stay here. No sound. No breath if you can help it. Mercy met her eyes. You coming back? Yes. Ruth whispered, you promise. The widow did not promise. She turned toward the ladder as the voices grew closer, the barn already listening, already remembering, already choosing what it would keep and what it would give away. Men's voices overlapped outside, rough and casual, carrying over the barn walls. A deputy laughed at something the sheriff said, low and mean. The widow pressed herself against the loft wall, knees drawn up, and listened. Above her, the girls huddled close, small and tense, their shadows melting into the straw. If they find us, Ruth whispered, eyes wide. They won't, Mercy said, trying to sound braver than she felt. You don't know that, Ruth said, voice cracking. The widow didn't answer. She could hear every word outside, every scrape of boots, every laugh like a warning. She pressed a hand over the girls, held them down beneath her weight. The past had taught her how fast fear could turn into something worse. She thought of her own fire. Years ago, another house, another family she'd watched burn without touching. Her husband had been too quiet then, too slow. She remembered the smell of charred wood and the way the smoke pressed against skin, filled lungs, forced memory into her head. That night, silence had been the only survivor. She swallowed, her throat tight, and then pulled tarps from the loft corner. She covered the girls. The smell of old hay mixed with soot and sweat and something sweet from the bread she'd brought. The tarps muffled them, hid them, made the loft a little smaller, a little safer. Outside, footsteps shifted. The sheriff cursed under his breath. A board creaked in reply. The deputy laughed again, louder this time. You hear that? Someone said. quiet now. The widow could feel their presence pressing down on the roof and walls. The barn seemed to hum under it. She pressed her cheek against the hay and felt the girl's small, frightened bodies press into her. Mercy's eyes met hers. "They'll come back," she said. "They always do," the widow whispered back, more to herself than them. Time dragged. The deputy called something else, a name she didn't recognize. She could hear the men move farther, then closer again. Her hands shook as she adjusted the tarps. Dust rose in small clouds around them. Ash from memory, ash from fear, settling into the air like smoke that never left. She counted each footstep, each scrape, each laugh. Then waited. Her mind wandered to the fire that had taken the house by the creek years ago, to her husband's silent face, to the small body she would never cradle. Patterns repeated themselves in these lands. Power came in boots and badges. Flames swallowed truth. Silence ate the rest. The girl's faces mirrored her memory, hollow, defiant, afraid. She tightened her hold on them. They were alive. That was enough for now. The sheriff's voice faded finally. The deputy's boots scraped across the boards once, twice. Then gone. The barn exhaled with the widow, with Mercy, with Ruth. The silence left behind was heavy, expectant, like the world had paused but had not yet decided what to do next. She let the girls peek out from under the tarps. "They gone?" Ruth asked, whisper sharp. "For now," the widow said. "But not forever." Mercy pressed close to her. "Will they come back?" "They always do," the widow said again, letting the words land like a warning. Outside, the wind moved the barn door just slightly. Shadows danced over the hay, over the tarps, over the girls' faces. It was a dance they could not escape. The widow pulled them tighter. "We wait," she said. "We wait, and we breathe only when we must." Night approached. The light turned the loft orange and gray. Shadows grew long across Mercy's sharp cheekbones and Ruth's pale face. They huddled together as the barn shifted and groaned, old and memory-soaked, like it remembered every fire and every silence that had come before. The widow thought of graves, of homes that listened and did not answer, of names that were spoken soft and carried farther than bodies ever could. She pulled the tarps tighter. Footsteps were gone, but the memory of them lingered. The girls shivered. "Are they coming back?" Ruth asked again. The widow shook her head, but her eyes followed the roofline. "They will," she said, flat and certain. "And when they do, we will not be gone. We will not disappear." Mercy pressed against her side. "We'll burn too?" she asked. "Not like that," the widow said. "We learn. We hide. We stay quiet. What burns, stays. But we survive." She felt the weight of the words settle into the loft with them. She pressed herself to the beam, arms around the girls. Outside, the wind rattled the barn, a sound almost like voices, almost like fire. The widow let them breathe, let them listen, let them hold their fear. Night pressed closer, but inside, they had the hay, the tarps, the barn. The past had come for them once. It would come again. They would be ready. And they waited. The widow led the girls through the yard, keeping to shadows, keeping low. The barn faded behind them, but the weight of it clung to their shoulders. Ruth stumbled on a root. Mercy caught her arm. "Careful," she whispered. "You heard him?" Ruth shook her head. "Who?" "The law," Mercy said. The widow said nothing. She knew the law followed, even when it was quiet. Even when it pretended not to exist. They reached the well house at the edge of the field. Its roof sagged, boards warped with age. The widow pushed the door open. Dust rose, motes floating like stars trapped in a box. She gestured inside. "Stay." The girls stepped in. The echo of their boots bounced against stone walls. Silence followed, thick, listening. "People throw things down here," the widow said, crouching near the mouth of the well. Ruth tilted her head. "Like what?" Like truth, the widow said. Mercy's eyes narrowed. Truth doesn't float. No. It sinks, the widow said. She pulled the cover off the well and gestured for the girls to look inside. Shadows stretched to the bottom, dark as memory. They shivered. Mercy swallowed. We saw it, she said, voice low. Ruth blinked. What? Buried, Mercy whispered. Not a body. She looked at the widow. Papers. Letters. Names. Ruth covered her mouth. Our daddy, he kept records. They were taken. Then burned. Some buried. The widow knelt, resting her hands on the rim of the well, leaning close. Names of who? Mercy shook her head. Not sure. Men you know. Men who think the land is theirs. Ruth's voice trembled. Some names we know too. She looked at the widow, eyes bright in the dim light. Like yours? The widow swallowed hard. She didn't answer. Not yet. She listened to the echo of their words, bouncing against the stones. It was strange, the way sound became heavier here, how a secret seemed to sink into the well and stay there. It reminded her of her husband. His name had been spoken by men like that, once. She pressed a hand to her chest, felt the memory thump like a small pulse. Mercy leaned closer. Do you know them? I've seen some, the widow said. She did not say more. The girls nodded, understanding without words. Can we touch it? Ruth asked. The papers. Not yet, the widow said. Not until we're ready. Until we know it's safe. She looked up at their faces. They were pale, hungry, fierce. Alive. That mattered. The echo of horses came next, soft at first, then louder, boots and hooves brushing against stone. The widow's hand went to her belt. She listened to the sounds travel across the field, bouncing off the barn, echoing in the hollow of the well. Mercy grabbed Ruth's hand. They're close, she whispered. Ruth nodded, teeth clenched. The widow leaned back. Listen, she said. Nothing you hear matters until I say it does. She turned her eyes toward the trees. Shadows moved among the trunks. Shapes that might have been men. Might have been wind. The girls held still. The well swallowed the sounds, made them round, gave them weight. The widow felt the pull, how memory clung to stone, how truth could hide in darkness and still speak. Why here? Ruth asked. Why not the barn? The widow's voice was low. Because the barn listens too well. It hears everything. Here, at least, the walls only tell what you let them. Mercy nodded. Like a secret friend. Exactly, the widow said. A friend who doesn't judge. Mercy's gaze dropped into the well again. Can we know some of the names? Soon, the widow said. She ran a hand down the rough stone, feeling it uneven beneath her fingers. First, we survive this night. Then we see what they buried. What they thought they could hide. Ruth leaned against her side. Will they find us? They always try, the widow said. But not tonight. The girls shivered as the echo of horses faded. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. The widow tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She felt the girls press close, felt their breaths in rhythm with hers. The well waited, silent, patient. Like it always had. Like it always would. She whispered, more to the stones than the girls, speak what you must. Nothing leaves this place unless we choose it. The echo swallowed her words. A faint whistle of air answered back. The girls looked up, eyes wide. They knew something had shifted. Some secret had landed and stayed. She held their hands. We go back only when it's safe. Not before. Mercy nodded. Ruth swallowed. We trust you. Yes, the widow said. For now, trust me. The well waited below, echoing each promise. Outside, horses approached again, closer this time, boots thudding like a heartbeat across the field. Inside, the stone listened. And the three women held tight to each other, ready for whatever would come next. The sheriff's boots crunched the dirt as he stepped into the well house, metal catching light, spurs clinking like warnings. The widow stood near the stone rim, her hands steady on the edge, her eyes sharp. Mercy and Ruth were behind her, pressed close, silent. "You hiding something?" he asked, voice casual but heavy, as though the weight of law alone made threats unnecessary. "Just grief," the widow said, keeping her tone even. He smirked. "Grief don't keep girls from running. Grief don't stop fires either." The girls flinched. The sheriff circled, slow, boots scraping stone. "You ain't had children. Easy to hide behind that." He leaned against the wall. "Easy to forget what life is worth." His eyes lingered on Mercy's burned badge, dark string curling like a wound. The widow's jaw tightened. "Life isn't worth what you think it is," she said. "Or who you think it belongs to." He laughed, low. "You think you're clever. Hiding them here. But law finds what it wants." "Then law will find lies too," the widow said. Her voice cut sharper than she expected. He stepped closer. "You'll regret keeping secrets. Property, papers, girls. You think you own any of it?" She shook her head slightly. "Not anymore. Just enough to keep them alive." Mercy peeked around the widow, eyes wide. Ruth held her wrist tight. "Law don't live here," the widow said, stepping fully between him and the girls. Her boots scraped stone. Her hands clenched. "It does today," the sheriff said, voice rising, dangerous. "And it does what it wants. You're not safe." She looked at the girls. Not safe, yes. But fear alone wouldn't guide her anymore. "I said law don't live here," she said, louder, firmer. "Not while I decide who breathes in this place." He stopped, surprise flickering across his face, quickly masked by anger. He shifted, hand brushing the badge on his belt. "You think defiance can hold. You think women like you matter when the law is done talking. We matter when we survive," she said. "When you leave." For a moment, the sheriff's lips thinned. He looked at the girls. Looked at the well. Looked at the widow. Something in him tightened. Then he laughed, sharp, short. "You're dangerous," he said. "All of you." "You try," she said, voice low, steady. She did not move. She did not blink. She held their fear and her own and something older, heavier, in her chest. He glared, then spun on his heel. The sound of his boots, clinking spurs, faded toward the field. Outside, the wind rattled the well house boards. The echo carried long after he was gone. The widow pressed a hand to her chest, felt it thump slow. She turned to the girls. "We decide what leaves this place. We decide who survives." Mercy exhaled, almost a laugh. "You scared him," she said. Ruth's lips trembled. "And us," she whispered. "Yes," the widow said. "All of us." She looked out at the open field, the trees, the empty dirt road. "And if he comes back," she said, "we will be ready." The girls clutched each other. The widow touched the burned badge on Mercy's wrist. "That mark doesn't bleed unless they want it to," she said. "And we won't let them. Not here. Not now." Outside, the wind moved the branches. The well swallowed her words, echoing them slow and steady. The girls understood. They nodded. They did not speak. Silence became their armor. The widow pulled them close. "Tonight," she said, "we hide. Tomorrow, we act." Mercy's eyes shone in the dim light. Ruth swallowed hard. The well waited below, dark and patient, as though it had always known. The sheriff had power, and he would try again. But here, inside stone walls, inside the shadow of the well, women had a choice. And for the first time, they were not afraid to make it. the night pressed against the boards. Their breath mixed, quiet and even. The echo of the sheriff was gone, but memory lingered, heavy and sharp. The girl slept a little against her, relief tense and fragile. She watched the door. She listened. And she made a decision. Whatever came next, they would meet it together. And no badge, no law, no fire would stop them. Outside, the field waited. The wind moved through trees. Inside, the well swallowed sound. And the widow, Mercy, and Ruth held their ground. The widow dug at the edge of the well house yard, dirt clumping under her fingers, the girls kneeling close, watching every motion. The letters were wrapped in oilcloth, tucked beneath a loose stone, hiding in plain sight. She pulled them free, dust rising like smoke from memory. Mercy leaned forward. "This gets us killed," she said, voice low, trembling with both fear and excitement. Ruth's small hands clutched hers. "So does staying," the widow said flatly, eyes on the papers, scanning names she recognized before she even read them. The letters smelled of smoke and age, ink faded but words sharp enough to draw lines between men and deeds, fires and land, deals and disappearances. Mercy traced the handwriting with a finger. "They burned the house," she whispered. "They buried this," Ruth said. "The proof." The widow nodded. Every name was a warning. Every word a weapon. She felt the power of it, how small letters could shift the course of lives. And how dangerous that could be in the hands of those who wanted silence. "We ride," the widow said. "Tonight." Before they circled back. Mercy looked at her. "You sure?" "No," she admitted, "but doing nothing kills too." Ruth's eyes were wide. "Will you come back?" Mercy asked after a pause, voice almost swallowed by night. The widow didn't answer. She only folded the letters into her coat and checked their small supplies, bread, water, a knife each, quiet like prayer. The horses waited beyond the orchard. Shadowed shapes in the moonlight, quiet and patient. The girls followed her, moving like shadows themselves, silent and aware. "Do you trust me?" the widow asked. Ruth nodded quickly. Mercy hesitated, thumb brushing the burned badge on her wrist. "For now," she said. "Good enough," the widow replied. They climbed into saddles. The night was still, almost mocking in its calm. No wind stirred. No owls hooted. Only the faint creak of leather, the soft bite of hooves on dirt. Every sound carried across the fields, every shadow could hide or betray them. Mercy glanced back at the barn. "They'll be looking for us." "They always do," the widow said. "But not tonight." The ride to town was slow. Dust hung low, touched by moonlight. The girls sat stiff, hands gripping reins, eyes wide, listening to the cadence of hooves. The widow felt the letters pressed against her chest, heavy and dangerous, a heartbeat she could not let go. "We're close," she whispered. "One wrong move and it's over." Mercy swallowed hard. "We'll be fine?" "We will," the widow said. "If we stay quiet. If we do as I say." At the edge of town, they paused behind a fence, the letters hidden beneath the coat again. Light from windows spilled onto the dirt streets. Voices drifted, but not their voices. They counted the steps, watched shadows move past. Ruth shivered. "We're really doing this," she said. Mercy's eyes were bright in the moonlight. "Finally." The widow nodded once. "Finally," she said. And it was more than movement. It was choice. Women like them had survived fires before. They had survived silence. They had survived men who thought badges and boots made them gods. Tonight, they would survive differently. They would speak. They would act. The wind shifted. A loose shutter rattled. The horses shifted beneath them. Mercy glanced up. "Will they come?" "Yes," the widow said. "But we're faster than them. Smarter than them. And not gone quiet." Ruth took a deep breath. "We won't vanish." The widow's lips tightened. "No. Not quiet. The letters burned lightly against her chest, proof that men who thought they could bury everything were wrong. She felt the girl shift beside her, full of fear, full of hope. Together, they rode the final stretch, toward town, toward confrontation, toward a night that could change everything. Dawn crept behind clouds as the edge of the town approached, pale light brushing rooftops. The widow guided the horses into the street, slow, deliberate. Mercy and Ruth followed her lead, faces pale, eyes sharp. No words were needed. The letters would speak, the truth would speak, and women who had been silenced for too long would finally be heard. And in that quiet, before the day fully broke, they were not lost. They were not invisible. They were alive. And they were coming for what had been taken from them. Town Hall smelled of dust and old wood, sunlight streaming through tall windows like spotlighted accusations. The widow stepped inside, letters pressed tight to her chest. Ruth and Mercy followed, faces pale but determined. People paused, murmurs threading through the room like a current. The sheriff leaned against the dais, smug, spurs catching the light. He smiled at her as if he already owned the room. "Morning," he said. "I hear you've got news." "I do," the widow said, voice low but clear. She opened the letters, one by one, letting them spill slightly onto the table. Names, deals, fires, deeds, all proofwritten in ink men thought could be hidden. The crowd leaned forward, murmurs rising, sharp, questioning. Mercy whispered, "They're staring." Ruth's hands shook. "Let them," the widow said. "Say her name," someone called from the back. The widow froze. The room went quiet. "Say what name?" the sheriff asked, a threat hiding in the edge of his voice. "The one who lit the fire," the crowd answered. "The one who thought this house could be burned, and the truth would go with it." He laughed, low. "You think letters scare me?" The widow's hand hovered over the papers. "They do more than scare. They expose." A man at the front gasped. Another whispered a name, faint but unmistakable. The sheriff's eyes darted, trying to catch control, but the room shifted, turned against him slowly, like water over stone. The widow read aloud one letter, steady, careful. Every word landed heavy. A name. A deal. A lie exposed. Gasps rose, and for the first time, the sheriff faltered. "Say it," someone shouted again. "Say her name." The widow let the letter drop to the table, ink smudged from handling. She met the sheriff's eyes. No more hiding. His hand went to his gun. Quick, sharp. But he did not draw fully. Hesitation flickered, barely caught. The crowd held. Breath caught. The weight of everyone watching, every secret unearthed, pinned him in place. "You think law lives here?" she asked, voice louder now. "It doesn't. Not while people watch. Not while truth stands." Her words carried across the room, steady, impossible to ignore. The gun lowered, slowly, almost reluctantly. The sheriff's jaw tightened, spurs scraping the floor. His authority faltered, fragile against letters, names, and the will of a few determined women. Mercy whispered to Ruth, "She's done it." Ruth nodded, still pale. "She's done it right." The widow's gaze swept the room, landing on familiar faces and strangers alike. Silence pressed against the walls heavier than any gunfire. This house, the hall, the benches, the high ceiling, watched everything, held the echo of every word, every threat, every confession. And now, it watched them stand. The letters lay exposed. Evidence of what men tried to hide. Names connected to fires, to disappearances, to power wielded as a weapon. The crowd murmured, realizing the depth. "Enough," the sheriff barked, voice cracking. He was no longer the center. He had become part of the story told by these women. The widow stepped back, letting the letters speak for themselves. "We will not be silent," she said, voice firm. "We will not vanish." The crowd leaned in. Some nodded. Some whispered. Some simply stared, taking in the weight of proof and courage combined. The sheriff's face flushed red. He could deny nothing now. Mercy squeezed Ruth's hand. The girls watched the widow. She had changed the room, shifted power without a shot fired, without a scream. The letters had done part, yes, but it was her will, her refusal to step aside, that held the room in balance. The widow turned toward the doors. Her voice carried one last warning, soft but unwavering. Watch this house. It sees everything. It remembers. And in that moment, silence fell heavier than any gun could have. The sheriff's spurs scraped the floor as he left, authority fractured but still breathing. Outside, the wind stirred in the streets. Inside, the town hall waited, holding memory, truth, and the weight of what had been spoken aloud. The girls exhaled together, relief fragile and bright. The widow folded the letters carefully. This is only the start, she said. But the start matters. Mercy and Ruth nodded. They had seen what courage looked like. They had felt it in every word, every movement, every choice to stand. Outside, the world kept spinning, but inside the house that watched, women had finally been seen, finally been heard. And the sheriff would not forget. The sheriff wasn't arrested. That was clear the moment the town council voted. He was removed, yes, stripped of title, power, badges, but the law, the system, still protected him. He left with a sneer that didn't reach his eyes, leaving behind only the echo of spurs and authority fading into memory. The widow watched him go was silent, the letters pressed tight against her chest, a reminder that justice here was always partial, messy, and tempered by fear. Mercy and Ruth clutched her hands. They didn't lock him up, Ruth whispered. No, the widow said. But they saw. The girl's eyes went wide. That counts? Mercy asked. It does, the widow said. Enough to start. They rode back to the farm, the dirt road stretching under hooves like a ribbon of possibility. The barn waited, patient, the hay smelling faintly of smoke and dust in memory. They dismounted, hands shaking, hearts still hammering. The letters were hidden again, tucked safely away, proof of a past no one could erase but that few would want to forget. The younger girl's voice trembled. Do we have to leave now? No, the widow said. Not unless you choose. Mercy looked toward the horizon. Will they come back? Some will, the widow said. Some never leave. But you have a choice now. Silence settled. Even the wind seemed still, as if waiting for their decision. Ruth stepped forward, eyes downcast. You don't owe me. The widow shook her head slowly. You don't either. But you owe yourself. Don't forget that. Mercy touched the badge on her wrist, the metal cool against skin. We know, she said. We know what we survived. The barn waited, listening. Memory hung heavy in the rafters, thick as dust. The widow looked at the girls, really looked, and for a moment she saw what she had given them and what they had given her. Not blood, not fire, not law, but something harder, the courage to be seen, to be alive. Will you stay? She asked, quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Mercy looked at her, steady. For now, she said. Ruth nodded, small and certain. For now, she echoed. They carried the letters back into the loft, placing them beneath old beams where light rarely touched. Dust motes floated above them, catching the sun like a memory of fire. The barn smelled of straw and smoke, of old wood and survival. Outside, the world kept moving, indifferent, but inside, everything had shifted. The widow stood at the ladder, hands on the worn wood. Nothing is perfect, she said, voice low. Nothing is ever fair. But some things are changed. She looked at Mercy and Ruth, at their small, bruised, unbroken faces. And some things will stay changed. The girls moved closer to her, shoulders brushing, quiet in the loft's shadows. Will you leave? Ruth asked, hesitant. No, the widow said. Not tonight. Not yet. We stay together. Mercy's hand brushed against the burned badge. It doesn't burn us anymore. The widow smiled faintly. No, she said. It doesn't. Not if we hold on. Outside, the world rumbled faintly, a distant wagon, a dog barking, someone calling a name. Inside, the barn held memory and choices and quiet victories. They had survived the fire, the law, the silence. They had survived themselves. The widow guided the girls to the loft, hay soft beneath them. They sat together in the fading light, shoulders touching, hearts slow but steady. Mercy whispered, "We stay?" The widow nodded once. "For now." Ruth's eyes drifted toward the ladder. "For now," she said. They didn't speak again. Words were unnecessary. The barn held them, full of everything remembered and everything saved. Outside, the wind stirred the fields. The sheriff would return in some form, men like him always did, but inside, they were safe. Not free, not perfect, but alive. The fire had forgotten them once. They would not forget themselves again. And in that quiet loft, among straw and shadow, women who had once been silent chose, finally, to remain. Sunlight spilled through the gaps in the barn siding, pale and trembling across the hay. The girls slept, curled close together, small bodies rising and falling with soft breaths. Mercy's hand rested on Ruth's shoulder. The widow stood at the ladder, watching them. She did not move. She did not speak. She breathed in the warm, dry smell of hay, the faint smoke memory of fires past, and the quiet that stretched through the beams like a promise. "You hear that?" she whispered. "What?" Mercy mumbled, still half in sleep. "Nothing," the widow said. She let her voice trail off, and for the first time, the barn answered with nothing. Pure silence. No boots, no voices, no law, no fire, just the loft holding them safe. She smiled faintly, almost cracked, but real. Ruth shifted, eyes blinking open, sunlight making her pale skin glow. "Morning," she said. Her voice was small, unsure. The widow's smile widened a little. She stepped down onto the hay, careful, letting the straw crunch softly beneath her boots. The girls stirred but did not rise. They were learning, slowly, that safety could exist, even if fragile. The widow pulled a strip of bread from her coat, broken roughly for each of them. "Eat," she said. "Then we see what Day wants to do." Mercy took hers silently. Ruth chewed quickly, eyes still half on the loft's shadows. The widow leaned back, hands resting on the floor, feeling the weight of hours past, of fear survived, of choices made. Above them, the sunlight shifted, brushing the beams, illuminating dust motes that floated like tiny ghosts caught in motion. The barn remembered everything, but it also let some things go. The fire, the law, the silence, they all lingered, but they could be held without breaking them. The widow watched the girls, saw the soft ease beginning to take root in their bodies, in the tilt of their heads, in the way they trusted her without a word. "Will it always be quiet?" Ruth asked after a pause, eyes wide, voice careful. "No," the widow said. "But it can be." Mercy nodded beside her. "We get to choose," she whispered. The widow did not answer. She only watched, feeling the truth settle in the space between them. The barn held them, yes, but they held themselves too, and that mattered more. The girls began to move, small stretches, yawns, soft laughter spilling quietly into the beams. The widow stayed where she was, letting the moment breathe around her. The ladder stood like a bridge between past and future, between fear and courage, between silence and sound. She touched the wooden rung, feeling the grain under her fingers. The barn waited, patient, old and listening, and she realized something she had almost forgotten: they were still here. Together. Alive. Not perfect. Not healed. But enduring. That was enough. "Breakfast is ready," she said finally, voice gentle, almost a joke. The girls rose slowly, brushing off hay, following her lead. The loft held its memory, but it also held the promise, that choice, that courage, could be as quiet or as loud as they wanted. Outside, the wind moved the fields. The world carried on. But in the hayloft, for the first morning since fire, since fear, since silence, the three of them breathed freely. The widow watched the sunlight catch the edges of the barn, dust motes floating, catching in midair like the fragile pieces of memory they had survived. "Nothing," the widow whispered again, almost to herself. The girls looked at her. Nothing, they echoed. And the barn held them, steady, quiet, enduring. For the first time in a long time, that was enough. The barn smelled the same. Dust, hay, faint smoke memory from years ago. Sunlight fell in streaks across the loft, warming the girls' faces. Mercy stretched, arms over her head. Ruth rubbed her eyes. The widow leaned on the ladder, watching them. Months had passed. They were quieter now, but the weight of the world hadn't left. It just softened. "You hear that?" the widow whispered. "What?" Ruth asked. "Nothing," she said. "For once." Mercy smiled faintly. The barn answered with silence, patient, like it had learned something new. The girls moved through the loft, stacking old letters they'd saved, tying them with string. "Are these safe?" Mercy asked. "As safe as we are," the widow said. "For now." Ruth touched the burned badge, tracing the scarred edges with a finger. "It doesn't hurt anymore." "Good," the widow said. "It never should again." She watched them, quiet. There was still fear in their eyes, yes, shadows of memory that didn't vanish, but there was also something else. Strength. Choice. Ownership of their own lives. Outside, horses neighed softly. Boots crunched on the dirt path. A neighbor waved from across the field. The widow nodded. "They know we're still here," she said. "And that's enough." Mercy tilted her head. "Do you ever leave?" "I do," the widow said. "But this place, it remembers. It keeps us safe. Reminds us who we are." The girls looked at the ladder. "We can climb down now?" Ruth asked. "Yes," the widow said. "And when we climb back up, it'll still be ours." They went down slowly, careful, feeling the hay underfoot, hearing the echoes of their past mix with present. Each step was deliberate, a small claim on life. Mercy whispered to Ruth, "We're really living, aren't we?" "Yes," Ruth said, voice soft, eyes wide. "Not hiding. Not running. Living." The widow watched them, letting the words settle. She thought of the sheriff, of fires, of silence. None of that had left completely, but the power had shifted. They were no longer ghosts of fear. They were witnesses. Survivors. The girls went to the old well, leaning over the stone rim. "You think it listens?" Mercy asked. "Yes," the widow said. "And it remembers. Every word, every secret. Every promise we made." Ruth looked at her. "Do you think it forgives?" "I don't know," the widow said. "But it doesn't judge either." "That's close enough." They carried water back to the loft, small task, simple rhythm. The letters stayed stacked, the badge lay on a board near Mercy. Sunlight moved slowly across their faces, warm and patient. "Will tomorrow be like this?" Ruth asked. "No," the widow said. "Tomorrow is whatever we choose." Mercy laughed, quiet and light. "I like that." The widow leaned against a beam. "I do too." She looked at the girls, alive, defiant, unbroken. "Remember, the barn watches. It waits. But it also protects. Always." They sat together on the hay, small warmth between them. Outside, the wind moved the fields. Inside, the loft held memory, courage, and choice. Silence lingered, but now it was different. It was theirs. And for the first time in a long time, they did not fear it. They simply listened. Years had passed. The barn was lighter now, clean streaks of sunlight through patched boards, dust dancing like old ghosts. Mercy and Ruth moved between haystacks, sorting seeds for planting. Their hands were steady, confident. The widow leaned on the ladder, watching, arms crossed. The three of them no longer moved with fear, but with careful rhythm, like memory had taught them patience. "Do you think it ever comes back?" Ruth asked, voice soft, eyes on the horizon. "Sometimes," the widow said. Memory always comes back. But it doesn't get to stay. Mercy smiled. We're stronger now. You survived fire, law, silence, the widow said. Nothing else should scare you. Ruth touched the old badge Mercy still carried in her pocket, the burned edges smooth. It doesn't, she said. Mercy nodded. Just reminds us. Outside, horses grazed, wind moving the fields. A neighbor waved across the yard. The girls waved back, laughter spilling lightly into the loft. The widow watched them, thought of the sheriff, the fires, the night spent hiding, the letters dug from the dirt. All of it was still there, a shadow in sunlight, but it didn't hold them down. Do you ever leave? Mercy asked. To see the world beyond? Yes, the widow said. But I always come back. She smiled faintly. This place, it remembers everything, and it protects what matters. You two matter. Ruth looked at her. We know. Mercy added, we'll keep it safe too. The barn seemed to breathe around them, beams holding sunlight, shadows, memory. The wind shifted outside, carrying the scent of grass and smoke from far-off fires. The loft felt alive in a different way now, not just a shelter, but a home, a witness, a quiet guardian. They moved toward the ladder together, 3 figures in sunlight. Small hands brushing hay, letters tucked in a chest, the badge still resting nearby. The widow stopped at the bottom, letting the girls climb first. She felt their strength, their choice. Will it always be like this? Ruth asked. No, the widow said. But we get to decide what stays. What we carry forward. Mercy nodded. We'll carry what matters. The wind stirred again, soft against the boards. The barn whispered, not with fear, not with memory, but with endurance. And the 3 of them stood there, shadows in sunlight, not hiding, not running, fully alive. Silence settled, heavier than ever, but this time it was quiet power. Choice. Survival. And at last, peace of a kind they had earned.